All right, my Bible in 365 brothers and sisters, we made it. We are at one of my favorite letters in the Bible, Paul's letter to the Thessalonian church. This is my wheelhouse. This is right up my alley. I love this stuff. Why? Because 1 Thessalonians is all about Bible prophecy. It's all about the second coming of Christ. It's about the rapture. It's about all that stuff. And folks, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. We get so much out of this book. It is incredible. And here's the thing I want to say. You will hear lots of pastors say things like, we should avoid all of this excitement about the rapture because the rapture will keep you from fighting for your country. Hogwash. I've never heard of a bigger lie. Okay, folks? I'm going to tell you this right now. If you know Bible prophecy the way God intended for you to know Bible prophecy, then you will love fighting for your nation. You will love being concerned about the moment in which you live, and 1 Thessalonians tells us all about that. As a matter of fact, if you want evidence of a guy that loves Bible prophecy, yet fights like literal hell for heaven, go look at Jack Hibbs. And I'd like to think that I'm a good example of that too. I love this stuff. I love this stuff. I love it. Now, Thessalonians is awesome, folks. It's awesome for a lot of reasons. And yes, I'm going to read some passages out of it, and I am going to hope and pray that I don't cry, but I'm probably going to cry because this stuff moves me in ways you can't even believe. It is powerful, and I'm already beginning to tear up thinking about it. So let me just simply tell you about 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians is the epitome of a book that teaches us to live as though we know Christ could come at any moment. And if we live as though Christ could come at any moment, we will be world changers. We will be impact makers. We will be intentional. We will be people who will make a dramatic difference in ways we can't even begin to understand. Because when we know that Christ could come at any moment, we will work as hard as we possibly can. Why? Because we don't want to get caught riding dirty. You understand? We want to be caught by the Lord doing the work that he has called us to do. And so when you go through the book of Thessalonians, it teaches us all of those things. As a matter of fact, Paul, before he even begins to talk about all of the stuff related to the rapture and the coming of the Lord, makes it clear how important it is to be upright in your walk, that the church be what the church is called to be by God, that the church make a difference. He touches up on that immediately in chapter 1 of 1 Thessalonians, and I absolutely love it because the idea here is that there is a picture that is created by people who love God and are serving God and understand the fact that he could come at any moment. When you get into 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, Paul gives us all kinds of advice on how we should not only live for the Lord, but how we should be preaching the gospel. Like, for example, he tells us to preach the gospel courageously, even in light of being persecuted, in light of being made fun of, in light of being ridiculed. When the times get tougher, we preach the gospel and we're bold and we're courageous about it. Even when the whole world says, you are too crazy, you speak up, especially in a world when Republicans and Democrats alike are literally contending for babies to die. Folks, it's crazy. But we are supposed to be bold and standing up for that. You know what else 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 tells us? It tells us that when we show people about our lives, when we teach people about the gospel, when we show them how we live, we are supposed to avoid having impure motives, meaning we should not be doing things for some sort of an externally based motive that is not related to the motivation that God puts within our hearts to minister to people. It also tells us that what is a pure motive instead of an impure motive is when the motive is to please God. And we need to learn to allow our motives to be that which is pleasing to God, and it completely changes absolutely everything. And by the way, if you do that, then you're also going to avoid some of the other things that the Apostle Paul tells you to avoid, and that is avoid using flattery, which can sometimes almost always account to deception, which is another thing that God tells us not to do, right? He doesn't want us to be deceptive people in our communication of something so incredible. Here's one that's interesting. He doesn't want us to be a burden to the non-believer. Okay, now this is really interesting because lots of pastors are like, the Lord is coming to give me your money, right? It's kind of crazy. God wants us to be resourceful. He wants us to think through things. He wants us to have sharp business minds. He wants us to take the things that God has given to us and to use them for really, really, really important things like serving others. And it's important because we're supposed to serve one another in ways we can't even begin to imagine. Folks, I want to tell you this. I say this all the time. I say, learn to love the people and use the money instead of loving the money and using the people. I get that from 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. It's an important principle, and it's one that is really, really critical. And then talking about walking in holiness and righteousness and encouraging one another, you get that from that chapter. And then, of course, 1 Thessalonians chapter 3 gives us such a great report and an example of what it's like when you live your life sold out. And we learn a lot about that through Timothy. And this is interesting because there's some things there that if you just sort of blow past, you're not going to pick up on. But if you study through, it's going to be powerful. Now, when you get into 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, that is when we talk about the rapture and what happens. And I got to tell you, my favorite verses in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 really come down to verse 13. Let me read this. It says this, but I would not have you be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that you sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. Now, I get emotional already because I think about my mom and my dad who are already with the Lord, you know? People that gave me the most incredible childhood, that gave me everything any son could ever ask for. But look at what he says in verse 14. He says, for if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with them. See, the church was worried. The church was worried that the people that had already died walking with the Lord would not be able to participate in the festivities of the rapture, that they were going to miss it out. And I get really emotional about this because my mom used to talk to me about the rapture all the time. My dad did too, but my mom always used to talk about her vision of how we were going to enjoy the rapture together and the Lord was going to take us up. And unfortunately for me, but fortunately for my mom, God took my mom to be with him a lot earlier. I wish we could have done it together. We made a deal, right? But look at this, because this is so spectacular. He says, for this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. In other words, those people that have already died and gone to be with the Lord, they're more alive than they ever have been, and they're not going to be prevented. They're not going to be held back from experiencing the wonders of what happens when the rapture takes place. I love this. Because look what it says. It says, verse 16, for the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel and with the trump of God. Notice this, the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain, notice this, shall be caught up. By the way, this is where we get the word rapture. When somebody tells you the word rapture is not in the Bible, they're ignorant. No, the folks are not ignorant, they're ignorant, okay? Because this word for caught up, this Greek word is harpazo, okay? It means snatched up. That word harpazo is translated in the Latin rapturus. And where we get our majority text from, we see that word rapturus, that's where we get the word rapture. So when somebody says rapture is not in the Bible, it is in the Bible. We get it from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. So we're going to get caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And notice this, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Ugh. I'm not going to cut this and re-edit it. I'm not. I'm just going to be myself. Look at the command, verse 18. Wherefore, comfort one another with these words. Oh, that's so comforting. I oftentimes find myself in a place where I comfort myself with these words, knowing what's coming. And then in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, The Apostle Paul starts off with something spectacularly important, and he says this. He says, but of the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you. Why? For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. Then he tells us that we're not the children of the night. We're children of the day. So it's not going to overtake us by surprise. But then he gives us these commands. He says, watch and be sober. Watch and be sober. What does it mean to watch and be sober? Folks, the number one thing that will take your sobriety away from you faster than anything in this world has nothing to do with drugs. It has nothing to do with alcohol. It has everything to do with sin. So walk in purity. When you stay close to God, your vision, your ability to discern, your ability to see things will be right there in front of you. Folks, walk in purity so that you can have clear vision. And I'm going to just tell you this right now about the rest of Thessalonians. It's powerful stuff. It teaches you how you should live. It encourages you to understand and recognize what's involved in the coming of the Lord. And it encourages you to live a righteous and I'm at a loss for words. A motivating life. That's the word I wanted to get out. Still trying not to cry. So ridiculous. I'm such a baby. But this is good stuff. I'm not editing this. I'm not. I want you to see how excited I am about this because it's so incredibly important. Folks, I'm going to tell you this right now. Christ could come at any moment. Jesus is coming soon. It's not a slogan. It's not something that I constantly say because I just say it because I just kind of think I should. No, I believe it. And I need you to believe it. The reason why we at BIBLEin365 make such an emphasis on the word, put such an emphasis, is because we want you to be prepared for when this moment comes. Because when it comes, it's going to be spectacular and it's going to be life-changing. And I don't want you to miss out on everything God has for you. Keep your eyes on the true and living God because he could come at any moment. I love you guys. Keep fighting the good fight. We got a Q&A coming up in a few weeks. I'm excited about it. I'm so proud of you. We are in fall. Literally, we're in October. I cannot believe you guys are killing it. You're doing a great job. You always motivate me to do what I do, and I love you guys for it. God bless you, and I'm going to tell you this right now. Keep on fighting the good fight. God bless you.